it's totally predictable, isn't it, that that would happen? Yes.
Can you give us specific information about XTC? You mentioned it.
XTC.
Yeah, it sounded really nice.
Do those letters mean anything?
Huh?
Do those letters mean anything, or is that just
What is it related to?
XTC, and again, I recommend Peter Stafford's book, Psychedelics Encyclopedia. XTC is a form of MDA, and the MDA molecule, it's possible to play with atoms as you go around a ring, and there are chemists in Northern California connected with a well-known university who, well, actually I can mention his name, Dr. Alexander Shulgin. Sasha Shulgin has spoken publicly about his experiments with the MDA ring, producing a variety of variations on the MDA molecule, one of which is called XTC. It would be better called empathy, because it's a drug that seems to activate something we were talking about before, a certain circuit. There are circuits in the brain, or there are ways you can focus your neurological equipment that it's really clear, and you just see exactly what's there in a very compassionate, loving way. So that the word empathy, and this drug seems to activate this experience, and people who have had this experience have told me, to go back to one of your earlier questions, that yes, once you have gotten to that position with a person, you've established a phone line, or you've established a connection of kind of real empathetic clarity between the two of you, that you can always dial up that number. It's easy to get back to it. So there are others. There's other drugs coming out like Atom, and then they have one thing about XTC is that it's not a genital aphrodisiac. You can be totally in love with the other person and perhaps stroke bodies as though you were flowers and that sort of thing, but it's not been a genitally active drug. But then there's another variation called Eve, or no, it's called Venus, which many people find gives you the compassion and empathy, but also with a genital option attached. I feel like a Chrysler salesman.
The effects still seem to be fairly descriptive of LSD. Do you think they're superior?
They're different, yeah. There's no hallucination, you see. There's no wild kaleidoscope. There's no going back in evolutionary time. It's just kind of here and now, clear and warm.
Have you found in your experience with consciousness-shifting materials two things? One, that there's a way of interconnecting them so that you maintain a certain energy level all the time, for one. And then the other thing is that with all the work you've done with regression and personal freeing, have you found that you need less sleep, that your body processes food better, you know, the kind of physical stuff?
Well, the first question had two parts. It had to do with other combinations of drugs, yes, and intelligent people are doing that. I talk to many people that are using LSD, and then they'll take ketamine during an LSD experience and have that experience and then come back to the LSD state. So that, yes, intelligent people are, because you see what you're doing, I mean, the drug is not important. It's the circuit of your brain that you're activating. See, in the drug, you want to get to New York City, you want to get to the Louvre, you want to get to the Vatican in Rome, you know, and you want to get to Livermore Nuclear Research Laboratory in your brain. Well, it doesn't make any difference whether you go by Pan Am or you go by, as long as you know how to get there. So that the use of multiple drugs during experience is because you want to access this circuit of your brain plus this, and then let's try that. So it's like, well, I'm there, so why don't I just go over to ketamine territory and then come back down? This is the frontier of intelligent research, and yes, that is being done. You said something else in your first part of your question about retaining a certain level of high all the time. I don't see that as a goal at all. My dear friend and comrade Richard Alpert Ramdas tells the story many times when he went to see his guru. You know, the guru ate all the acid and nothing happened. He went back a second time and he really made sure that he took all the acid, and then he said, well, it's all right, LSD's all right, but it doesn't keep you high all the time. And I said, well, of course, like a 747 is all right, but you don't be high all the time. You use the 747 to be high to get to where you want to go, and then you come down. And so that the concept that Richard brought back is that he wanted to be high in that state all the time. Is I think it's a kind of a traditional, but in some way an antiquated Oriental belief that the aim of life is to get higher and higher. It's a static, almost linear thing. So there's this one place where you can get so high and you're off the wheel. And this is, of course, a temperamental difference, but it's also a lifestyle. And I suppose a real together Hindu would say it's my Western neurosis. But I think that the aim of life is to be dialing and tuning all these possibilities, and to be moving ahead and exploring. And you don't want to be at any one place, but you want to have the knowledge and the equipment to be able to get to these positions. But now the second question has to do with my own personal life. My life, of course, is unique and very different from anyone else in this room. I do an enormous amount of traveling, and I'm twice or probably 3 times older than most of you, so that any generalizations that I would make about myself I don't think would work for you. And I've been through many cycles of civilizations, so that you know, I was around before there was junk food. But I like to sleep. I enjoy sleeping very much, partly because I'm so active. You can imagine what Willie and David and I have done every day since we've been here in Boulder. I got 4 interviews and running around, and spent a lot of time with William Burroughs and here, and then giving a lecture, and then zipping and zapping. So yes, I enjoy the 8 hours that I've slept here, because it's a way of meditating, it's a way of quieting down, it's a way of accessing and regressing and things like that. But that wouldn't necessarily answer the question of anyone else. But I found during this last break have such a small amount of time to be together. I said yesterday, and I'll repeat it, I wish that this were an ongoing body-brain shop, that we could be meeting once a week for 6 months, some sort of a higher education, because the frustration of meeting this way and being together and getting such incredible high energy and group cohesiveness, and we're just getting to know each other's separate styles, and then to have it end so quickly. And there's so much that we could and should cover in the next few hours together. For example, I know many of you are interested in the intelligent use of drugs, and it's probably not going to be possible to get into as many details as we would like to. The politics of drugs, and the fact that I really believe that since we are moving from the feudal, from the industrial civilization into this new civilization of information and communication and intelligence, no question that that is happening, then drugs become, brain change drugs become very important. That, you know, in a sense, in the information age, brain change chemicals are like oil and industrial chemicals were for the industrial age. And just as DuPonts and Rockefellers and Gulfs and all those people were key to the industrial society, I feel that the intelligent use of information drugs or brain drugs, and that's why even today, believe it or not, in 1983, yesterday, the government took our tax dollars and sprayed paraquat in Georgia. I mean, and is that insane? I mean, what do people in Georgia think? Presumably 2 out of every 3 young Georgians between the ages of 1836 has and will use marijuana, and here's our own government at war with us spraying. And the reason for that is, and the reason it's no accident that Nancy Reagan, when her image at the beginning was down because of the fancy plates, remember, and the fancy Paris dresses, well, they had to change her image, so she was going to become the drug crusader and give us a drug-free America, if you can believe that concept. But yet there's a certain wisdom there, because that group of people who are resisting the information society and trying to keep their control recognize that free access and intelligent options to drugs, and it's not just hedonism, which they're against, it's also individual growth and individual development and people getting smarter. And the very notion of a play shop like this about the evolution of intelligence is something that is... So the reason that drugs are today, as the very word, sets off nuclear explosions of hysteria in so many people's minds. Yes, Robert?
Tim, I don't want to bring you down, but I'd like to get back to the question of your depression that you mentioned when you first came.
Yes.
Okay, now it seems to me, when you were talking about that if you would be willing to come back, you know, once a week or once every 2 weeks, I'm sure, if you would be willing to commit yourself to that, I'm sure that there are people here that could put that together financially and help them make all the arrangements.
I would love to have a place in this area where I could come and spend, you know, 2 or 3 months a year. I love to ski, for example. I love snow and right? For starters, though, let's follow your suggestion. Why doesn't everyone leave their name and address so that we can keep in touch with each other? And perhaps I could get a mailing, a reading list or some way of keeping in touch. And then let's explore the possibility of my coming back. Let's explore the possibility of this group getting together, maybe even when I'm not here. Yeah, I knew my depression would be dissipated once we put our intelligences together. Yes?
This brother says that he's part of a weekly group in Santa Cruz that meets to discuss these very issues. I think we could do the same thing here. And you coming back would really be just wonderful. But while you weren't here, we could continue to meet weekly or every other week or something and share information and resources.
I do feel, you know, with all modesty, that what we're doing this weekend is the most important thing that can be done by any group. The very concept of evolution of intelligence, and in a practical way too. We're not just vague, and so yes, I think it should be continued, and I'm sure it will grow too, because the way DNA works and the way evolution works is that you've read Sheldrake's theory of morphogenetic resonance and the 100 monkeys. One monkey washes the potatoes in the salt, and then there are 5, and then there are 10, and pretty soon there are 100, and then pretty soon in all the islands that have never heard about it, the monkeys are running down washing their food. This phenomena does work, and I think that 30 or 40 of us here, each going out, is networking with others, and yes, anything I can do to help continue this will relieve my depression, Robert.
Book list would be a big help. A book list on this general situation.
Sure.
I would recommend would be a great help to me. I'd keep me busy for a while.
Step number 1 is...
maybe you could mail a book list to me and we could distribute it. We have all your names.
Why don't you be responsible, David, for the mailing list and get everyone's name, and then I'll be responsible for funneling through David.
Put a piece of paper up in the desk there. Make sure you sign your name and keep you updated.
Now, one of the things that occurred to me that this would be a wonderful opportunity to use the latest technology of video conferencing. You could be at
teleconferencing,
teleconferencing. You could be at home talking to us. with a video camera digitizer, and we could have an output over here, and we could switch back and forth and really have practically the same type of conversation.
What would be on the screen, pictures or words? Yeah, that's the idea. A business.
A video camera on both ends.
Yeah, yeah.
And digitize it through a computer, and then send it through the telephone.
What's the economics of that? Is it feasible for us to do that?
I would say less than $10,000.
For how much?
And then we can do
Equipment.
we do it all the time after that.
All the time.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Yeah.
We probably could get it together out of the equipment that's here in Boulder already, owned by individual people. I'm sure we could put the equipment.
Because I might be able to.
I know a place where we could do that.
Yeah. I might be able to get access so that I could go into someone's office and do it. Yeah. Let's talk about that, Robert.
Okay. Yeah. 'Cause at your public lecture up at the university, the owner of the Boulder Computer Resource Center was there. And he's very interested in what you had to say.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a friend of mine. I can go talk to him.
Good.
We can just use that.
Good.
You know, they've got all the equipment.
Good.
So if you could get some kind of hookup, get you hooked up on
Okay.
it, and then we could do it. I mean, you know, IBM is doing it with their executives and salesmen and so on. Why can't we do it?
I know businesses do it all the time. They're discussing, selling paint cans. They're doing it. Yeah, let's explore that.
Okay, that's great.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just saying, I have an electronics company, and we have all the equipment to do that. So,
Really?
we'd be glad to hook you up to do that and make sure.
So I'd have to get someplace in California where I could go in, and there'd be a modem connection. Yeah. All right. Let's.
Any phone line, just plug in.
Yeah.
You
Dial up the right number.
could be in your study.
It can be done by a modem. Oh boy. Well, let's try that, huh? Let's try that, huh? Okay, good.
He did have that as a project. Sure. Well, just reach out.
Make sure I have your. Well, I'll have your telephone numbers too, so that I can be in touch. Good. Okay. Wasn't that wonderful?
Yes, definitely.
Feel better?
What? I know. Well, the next three stages of intelligence come under the general heading of discovering the body. It's body intelligence, somatic intelligence, or somatic sensory intelligence. When we do our regression to go back to re-experience and re-imprint, we will be probably trying to get us all back to that time, the first time that you got high. And you made that sudden discovery that you had been living inside a chessboard of imprints that were accidental or that you weren't aware of. You were living in realities that your brain had fabricated without your knowledge, that you had been a kind of a blind robot taking all these little chessboard situations so seriously, and suddenly you have an overview of that. I guess that's why they say it's getting high, and or a distance from it, and with great tenderness you laugh at yourself and at everyone else for taking it so seriously and not seeing that chessboard is just a wonderful little node of possibilities. Granted that it's very important, but still, of course, you're much better at it once you get the distance from it. And I think that the first step, and what we're doing now for the next hours, is we are studying the neurotechnology of self. Because up to the present time, it's been social, it's been learning languages, it's been instinctual mammalian, it's almost species territorial. But the notion of self, the discovery of self, I think is the key to what we call the trend. And it's ironic that although we want to get rid of the ego we're trying to get rid of is that ego that's trapped in an identity, in a role, in an imprint or an unconscious condition pattern. But the notion of self is not ego. That you are a unique instrument, and the first level of selfhood is the discovery of your body. And there's one glorious thing that has happened because of the consciousness movement of the 60s. It has been this extraordinary resurrection, reawakening of body intelligence. I can tell you flatly that in the Eisenhower 50s, the body was simply a robot that you would put, you would shave it, and you would put underarm a little bit, and you'd feed it, and that was about it. The notion that the body is this extraordinary temple or instrument filled, super equipped with binocular optical lenses and auditory sensitivities and tactile, kinesthetic, and olfactory and taste and sensory and erotic equipment. The whole notion of pleasure. I was a psychologist. I was a very, very well-respected psychologist at the age of 40. I'd written 2 classic books on psychodiagnosis and personality. And the notion of pleasure, of intelligent hedonism, the notion of planning your life as a work of art was unheard of in psychology, Freudian psychology, even Jungian psychology, which is wonderful in terms of archetypes and so forth. But this notion of aesthetic body intelligence, and you know, the typical experience, the first time you turn on, you look at a flower, and for the first time, you can really experience that flower aesthetically. Or you look at a red light, and it's no longer just an order to stop. My God, look at it. It's like the ruby of God, you know, flashing away there. And, you know, the typical person that's stoned, you know, they're kind of looking there, looking out into the blue, you know, and well, hey, come on, what's going on? You know, well, dig that blue, you know, color. Now, I have been taught a great deal about this dimension of intelligence from people that call themselves artists, and as an intellectual and as a linear thinker, and as a I never realized that artists went around, and artists were always looking at the color combination in this room, the angle, the way the colors meet, the depth like that, that people that have this, who have activated, or perhaps they're hardwired by DNA, I don't know how they, maybe just as the young people growing up, they were lucky enough to be imprinted by some teacher. I don't know how it develops, that there are certain people that are artists, even before they got high. But, and there's no accident either, that once we started experimenting, by we, I mean we at Harvard, but we collectively in America, began experimenting with conscious alteration, it was the artist that immediately came forth and understood it. And most of the great artists of our time, visual artists and musical artists and dance artists, were very quick to understand these drugs can access circuits in our brains and other people's brains as well. So, I've been, you know, I've been characterized by the press in general as being less than a clean-cut, wonderful person. There's been a lot of bad publicity around my name, and particularly the more established the organ like Time or Newsweek or New York Times, so forth, the more instinctive hostility to and distortion of what I've been trying to say. And I've found that art publications and people who write for these, for example, strangely enough, Women's Wear Daily has always been extremely positive to what I'm doing. You think of all publications, you know, it's kind of high fashion, you know, and but the people in high fashion, the intelligent, would realize that the aim of life is high fashion and is high style and they want people to think about how they look and how they dress and how they present themselves, because that's the glory of one of the aims of life. And often I've thought that DNA or God or whatever you want to call her is basically an artist. She wouldn't have surrounded us with all this incredible, or look at the flowers and the bees. So what we're going to do in the next stage is to try to bring ourselves to that position. By the way, we're no longer going back necessarily. From now on, we may go back to that first moment when we discovered that we literally are in a Garden of Eden of beauty, and that the body is not just a robot to get us to food and get us to work and get us back and to bang, 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 reproduce and so forth, but that the body is this incredible instrument. And I think everyone in this room had that moment when you understood this about the body, because most of you in this room are involved in body work or have done sequences and courses and trainings in body awareness. So, now, just as there have been 3 stages of each one of these levels of intelligence, in linguistics there was the passive, where you simply mimic. You mimic the words, you mimic the sounds, and then you invent and you kind of create, and then you link up. And you got to go through these 3 stages. If you just passively mimic, or if when you get into pleasure and erotic or bodily activity, if you just passively enjoy, you're stuck. Yes, you have to be able to do that to open yourself up to the receptivity, but then you've got to become active, so that you're a hedonist and you're smoking grass and listening to the Beatles records, and that's great. But you've got to get off your ass, and you've got to get out there and start creating beauty. You have to be an artist yourself. So it's that second stage of when you made that decision, or how you made that decision to become an active artist, or to define your life as a work of art. And I think that is an absolute necessary step in the evolution of intelligence. Now, you don't want to do it all the time, because you know, there's more, but you certainly have to be a master of the fine art of your own sensory and somatic equipment. And then once you have developed confidence, self-confidence in your ability to create beauty, and you've taken responsibility for your posture and your dress and your kind of home that you live in, all that, is not just imitating. There was one time, of course, when hippies all looked the same. That was disastrous. You know, everyone let their hair grow long and wore the same kind of clothes. That's kind of a passive, that's mimicking. It's good. It's better than wearing it's better to wear, you know, an Indian sari like everyone else. It's better to do that than wearing 3-piece suits. But then what we've seen in the 70s was, I think, a wonderful sense of individual choice, as people decided exactly how they wanted to wear their hair. And some kept it long, shaped it, and so forth, so that you were creating yourself as a work of art. But inevitably, you have to move to the next stage, which is fusing, linking, and creating collective works of symbolism, or of society, or of, in this case, of art. So you have the hedonist who just lays back and enjoys, and that's good. That's a part of your brain, and you should devote at least, you know, a half hour, an hour a day, or several hours a week to just lapping it up. But as much time certainly should be spent in recreating and then and sharing. The sharing of beauty is tantra. That's one word for it, or of artistic collaboration. The wonderful thing about musical groups is that they're playing in tune with each other, or collective works of artists on a project. So we're going to focus on the awakening of the sensory, the awakening of the notion of self, the awakening to the idea that your body is your own instrument and doesn't belong to Billy Graham. Your hand is on the control dials of your body, not Billy Graham's or Nancy Reagan's, because if you let their hand freeze on your controls, there's not much option for you. Well, again, I've been trying to send little messages to trigger off memories, and why don't we relax and Sure.
Start off with your legs uncrossed. When you're doing your relaxation processes on your own, it's a good way to work. Don't cross your circuit, so to speak. Let the energy and circulation be as open as possible. Of course, it doesn't have to be done in this position, but it seems to relax the mental tension as well as the physical tension. It helps you get out of your own way. Well, today we're going to start off very similar to the way we were doing before. And we're going to start off with imagination, right to start with. So, nice big deep breath, filling your lungs all the way into your throat. Good. Exhaling. Let yourself really relax now. Last night, those great times you had, with a nice big deep breath, filling your lungs. Once again, letting your mind relax as you exhale this time, quieting the analytical mind. And now a third, nice big deep breath, filling your lungs again, letting your eyes close as you exhale, quieting the analytical mind as much as is comfortable, as you allow yourself to focus the power of your mind on everything, starting with a petal, which someone's coming around and putting a petal right on your lips. Picture that petal. It tastes sweet like the sweetest flower. Something magic in that petal allows you to access those inner parts of the mind which are there. And then as the petal begins to take its place and to do its job, you begin to notice a good place to start is by relaxing, and with that relaxation bringing consciousness to each area, starting with the very top of your head. Feel any tension or pressure inside the head or on top of the head, in the scalp, really relaxing. In back of the ears, at the neck, releasing and relaxing as if a warm shower was gently caressing your scalp. Relaxing your forehead and eyebrows and eyes. And as you are aware of the relaxation occurring, you notice a consciousness occurring in the area of the third eye. A kind of interesting buzzing sensation. Or perhaps you may experience it a bit electrical or even magnetic, as if there was a magnet right there in the third eye area, and you feel a kind of interesting warmth or heat. Breathe into that heat in the third eye. This time take a nice big deep breath and point your eyes inward as if you're crossing your eyes and look at that particular point as you exhale. Let's do that once again, looking at that inner point and taking a deep breath and really noticing your consciousness at that very point. And exhaling and relaxing the eyes and understanding that we can picture that point as a doorway, an ancient doorway, perhaps the most ancient. On either side of the door are two pillars of white marble. You stand at the door with ease and confidence as the door swings open easily, and inside is a room of crystals, white crystals of every dimension, shape, size, and yet with that own inner brilliance that seems to light up every inner circuit of your brain. There's not a cell in your brain which looks dark or unlit up. And you see it can be done very gently and beginning to improve and increase in velocity and intensity as we continue. As we continue then inside the mind, we see an awareness going down and a relaxation occurring in the jaw and in the tongue, relaxing the throat and the back of the neck, feeling an easier flow of breath now as we take a breath and really release as you exhale and enjoy that pleasant but interesting sensation, the quietness and the peacefulness of the mind, but that comes with more vivid colors, shapes, and sizes. As we continue on the journey through our body, we also continue on the journey in the inside of the mind, the crystal room. We walk up to a particular crystal and walk through it. And as we do, it opens up another part of our circuitry. The amazingness of what it brings. Colors and petals running one into another, perhaps starting with the most vivid red. Red, something that you sense and you feel and you experience. And you notice from the tip or that point of the doorway in your mind, the red continues through the throat, down to the heart, down to the diaphragm. Breathe it in. Nice big deep breath. Exhale it. Down to the very root, or what we might call the core chakra. That part which is a root to creation, to your sensuality, to a key basic flow of the universe, your sexuality. And are aware now that the mind and the body are not separate, but are beginning to work as a more unified circuit to bring more enjoyment, ecstasy, and fulfillment, creation and stimulation to the artist's part of you, as the circulation continues on down to the feet and the toes. And now we see and feel and experience
try to recall the first time you attained that state of transcendence when you could look at your life, at your environment, at yourself with tender, humorous acceptance, and realize that there was much more. The first time you got high, try to remember where, with whom, what particular sensory hit. Was it your eye? Was it music? Was it touch? Try to remember the first time you experienced bodily bliss, pure in itself, not sexual passion, or not acrobatic success in a game. It's pure pleasure. The laughter you felt, to realize that you had inside yourself all these years, these buttons, these wonderful organs, these sensory instruments, this incredible organ of pure pleasure Perhaps at that moment you smiled or laughed to realize that for the rest of your life you would always know that this wonderful, pleasurable option was there. That sense of awe that you felt. Ah, this is what the poets have written about. This is what the great visionaries have talked about. This is what the great hedonists have talked about. Pure, open, non-guilty, aesthetic bliss. Next, try to remember that time in your life when you consciously decided to change your artistic or your aesthetic posture. You looked at yourself in the mirror, or you looked around your room or your house and you decided, I don't want to be that robot anymore. I want to change my dress, or change my hair, or change my room. When you began looking around at the flowers and the colors and seeing them with a freshness. Looking back, ask yourself this question. Are you trapped in some hedonic lock? When's the last time you consciously opened yourself up to a new form of pleasure? Or changed your style of aesthetics? If you're the artist of your life, what's your most recent production? Are you ready to start a new work of art as you move into the next chapters of your life? Are there any residual morals or puritanical fears or early shames that are holding you back? Are there any 60s attitudes that were wonderful at the time but need to be changed as you move into the 80s? Or 70s attitudes? Are you still reawakening this most precious gift, the wonder of pure, fulfilled sensory and bodily bliss?
And as you recall this aspect in yourself, you find a feeling that comes from deep within inside that continues to be creative and to urge you on. You hear the sound of your DNA calling to you to continue to unravel that creative, artistic part of you in everything that you do, in every work and application, in every communication and love. You find new artistic ways of seeing and experiencing it. And with that consciousness, come forward at the count of 3. 1, deep breath and circulation improving in the hands and feet. 2, nice big deep breath, feeling circulation and clarity of mind continuing. And 3, wide awake and high.
Margaret. I'm really curious as to where that took us. Does anyone have willing to?
Part of it took me back one time when I was really super tired. A friend of mine gave me a facial massage. And I can't explain it other than when you're really super tired and you've got your scalp and your face being massaged, it's sort of like you're so aware of all of that and the rest of your body just isn't quite there. And it's really neat, you know? It's like it's just so there.
Mm-hmm.
I was taken back to a period in my life when I was very aggressive and hostile and fighting with a lot of people I lived with. And I decided to get high and go climb a mountain, take a look at it all. And the higher I got, the more I saw myself. I established that what was happening was that we're all performing artists. And the art that I was performing, if I were to be a critic of my art form, was extremely poor taste. And
you gave yourself a bad review.
not only were we performing arts, we were also art critics.
Yeah.
The performance that we were doing was a reflection of our tastes and what we thought was good, and I resolved that I needed to be more critical of what I was creating, and decided that I did not wish to be hostile and angry with people around me all the time anymore, and that that was not an attractive art form in the way of a performing artist.
Anyone else? How many of you could remember the first time you really got high? Let's have a show of hands.
Well, sir.
Every time's the first time.
Yeah.
I remember in particular time I was having a party and this guy came and he said he'd just seen a great movie and he babysat all the kids and all the party could go, and it was Hard Day's Night, and it really turned me on because those Beatles were just, they were really loose in their bodies, and it just did something to my body, and I came home so high. That was one of the times, you know. It was really neat.
That was a lot. It was 1963, wasn't it? 64, yeah.
First time I ever got high was after I started working for you. And I went up in Ray Henry's apartment, and she's a student of art history. I took some white lightning, and there were all these art books around. And we spent the whole afternoon looking at the history of art, which I'd studied in college and university, and had a totally different picture of it. And someone asked me what I thought of the experience afterwards, and I said it was equal to a 4-year college education.
What happened to Gray Henry?
She's living in London.
Didn't she go to Egypt?
Right, they have a house in Cairo, or outside of Cairo, in Madi.
Yeah.
They'd love to see you.
Say hello to her if you are in touch with her.
I almost drowned in 1948. I was 6 years old, and that was, I would consider, my first high. And it took a lot of years to be able to talk to somebody about it because of the time.
Yeah, it was an out-of-the-body experience? Near-death experience?
Yes.
Yeah. But we're going to talk more about those in, this afternoon, experimental dying and voluntary reversible death experiences. Think about that one.
Very fast. In 20 minutes, you can do 12-hour LSD to you.
Yeah. Well, my memories of the first time I got this insight, I think I expressed in when I was talking during the experiment. That was exactly what I was telling you. Obviously, it was my memory of my first experience of how I kind of laughed at myself for having been so dumb all these years to not. And I don't know whether you've had this experience. But I'm from an earlier generation, So I probably had to go through some long detours that you didn't have to, but I was always very interested in art, and I would go around all the museums, and at times I lived in Europe, and I knew every room in the Pitti Palace and the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, and I'd been to Spain, and I'd been to all these great museums, and I knew the history of arts, and I lived in Florence, and read Vasari's Lives of the Artists, and went to all these different cathedrals, and where all the paintings were in Giotto, and I thought, boy, I knew more about art, and I looked at more art, but it was all like some, it was all in my head, it was all left brain, and then the first, I described some of it in flashbacks. The first few times I understood that that wasn't art at all. That was art literature. That was being, art meditation at the thrill of the direct, fresh experience.
That was exactly my experience.
Yeah. You? Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that was nice. Well, Iris, how about you?
I think it goes back to what we were saying the other day, the experience of, has anyone ever been at had some sort of spiritual or metaphysical or whatever experience or inner experience on LSD? Or it was something simple like when we were talking the other day where it just is making sense to you at that point in time. And somebody else running up to you going, oh my God, are you all right? This person's flipping out. And you're going, no, it just is. You know, I don't know. That and perhaps flashbacks of old Black Sabbath records.
Good morning, Rebecca. Good morning. We have moved to the hedonic, aesthetic, somatic level of intelligence, and we were talking about becoming artists of your own life and defining your life as a work of art, and getting art grants, and becoming an art critic of your own. Yes?
I'd like to go back to something that you referred to before, along with a lot of the revolutionary thought that you've been implanting with us. I noticed that you referred to the Creator, the Almighty Creator, as a woman. And I was curious as how long you've had that concept and how valid you think it is.
Well, I had the terrible misfortune of having been born Irish and Celtic, and it was so that there's a certain amount of whimsy there, and I try not to get too serious too much of the time because you lose so much of the perspective. So many of the times I say things like that, like I'm not making a big issue of it. You know, I haven't written a book philosophically defending it, but I throw a little line in like that just to make people think. And
how long you have that concept? Is it recent, or is it something that you've carried around for 20 years?
Well, yeah, I remember Allen Ginsberg in 1962 came to me and he said, my gosh, there are these new Gospels, Gnostic Gospels, that say that Jehovah, the male god, was a real ne'er-do-well in the God family. And that actually the chief god, or if there was such a thing, was a woman, I forget what her name was. She had the attributes of grace or something.
A lot of names.
Yeah. Yeah, whatever. But this was like Gnostic Christian, and it was all from that tradition, Judeo-Christian. And they said the chief head god was a woman, but then there was no big deal. There was no chief. Everyone was like doing their god thing. But this Jehovah was like a runaway troublemaker, a juvenile delinquent. He could say, I'm the only one. I said, you? Of all people, you? So Allen Ginsberg that was the first time he put in so many words. Since I've been publicizing flashbacks, I've been doing a lot of radio interviews from home. I sit in my office, and there are these radio stations all over the country. I think I talked about this the other night. And I suddenly find myself talking to a radio station in Topeka, Kansas, and people call in. And occasionally, but actually statistically rarely, about 70% of the calls are really positive or serious about some technical question that assumes a communality of interests. And less than 10% or 15% are really hysterically hostile. But occasionally someone attacks me for being against God. And I say, you can't take God away from me, and I believe in God just as much as anyone else, and I dedicated my life, although I see her differently than you do, and neither. You can feel the person on the other side. And they can't attack me, because what are they going to say? Well, yeah.
You know, it seems like your question was off the point of body awareness.
Right, it was. Going back to something.
Well, but wait, let me make my point. It seems like it is, but actually, I'm oriented in the Jungian direction, and the body is feminine. And the point of God being feminine is saying that the body is divine, that there's spirituality in the body, which is really against the Christian view, where Christ is the upper chakras and the lower chakras are the devil. It's sort of integrating all the chakras and bringing the body into the spiritual world.
This would lead to a higher spiritual understanding. That's what I was thinking.
Definite for me.
Perhaps the pendulum is swinging more towards an understanding of the feminine aspect of deity, less one-sided.
Well, didn't you in some of your books write a capital S and a capital H?
Yeah. That was a
real good idea.
It is interesting that in many of the Romance languages, as you know, the every noun has a gender, and it's and whether it ends in A or O, and or it comes from Latin too, I guess, which is it's interesting. They have that polarity. I think in the world in which I grew up as a child and even as a young person, the polarity was just very obvious, that women's magazines were concerned with cosmetics, with beauty, with dress, with architecture, with House Beautiful, House and Gardens, perfumes, jewelry, lotions, so that clearly the culture said, well, everything that has to do with pleasure is over there in the women's pages. Whereas the men read Field and Stream, or National Rifleman, or Sports Illustrated, or New Republic. And again, it was only after I started experimenting with altered states and I began realizing that I had been cut off, and being a dutiful, I'll take out, forget dutiful, being a person in that culture, how come men just gave to women all of these things that, when you come to think about it, are much more fun than riflemen's or political argumentation and sitting around in smoky rooms playing those games. So I think I came to that, and of course, as old as I was and square as I was, the laughter and joy I had laughing at myself was all the more because of that experience. I think that maybe some of you in this room are young enough that you don't realize that 20 years ago or 25 years ago, the idea of a man using a hairdryer
carrying a bag or anything.
Or yes, or a man having designer clothes. I mean, what do you? I mean, it's absolutely inconceivable. And the erotization and the raising of the aesthetic level that has occurred in this country in the last 25 years, due, of course, not due, but also accompanied by or in relationship to the use of drugs and conscious expansion and the it's not to mention, of course, I tried to do a study taking the phone book from 1930, 1940, 1950 of the number of massage places, or the number of yoga, or the number of personal development centers, and there, of course, it was zero. The only if you wanted to change your mind, you went to a psychiatrist and you looked up under MDs, and there it was. But there's this enormous, I think I heard it said that the aesthetics, quality of life, self-improvement, personal fitness,